Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Hard Count podcast. And this time we're going to be going over this week's games, what I saw, what I liked from each team, what not so much. And all right, let's get right into it. So, first game, Thursday night, Indianapolis 17 at Houston 20. I'm going to be going over these quickly because there's been a lot of games. There was a lot of games, and I don't want to make you guys sit through too long through this. So, let's start with Deshaun Watson. I think aside from this game, he played the worst game of his season. He was inconsistent throwing the ball, and he had an interception. The Texans really just as a whole played not so great of a game, but I think this goes back to the low-ceiling Colts team that I was talking about. They played a very good game, but it just wasn't not enough. They were able to get the ball moving on the ground with Jonathan Williams in at backup, but Jacoby Brissett and the passing game just never really got anything going. T.Y. Hilton was back and was held to just 18 yards on 3 receptions. I thought he might be a spark this team needed to get this more dynamic feel for that team going, but didn't look like it at all. Will Fuller, on the other hand, DeAndre Hopkins, they did get something done. Fuller finished with 140 yards, and Hopkins finished with 94. I think this is going to be a Will Fuller show. I think he's going to be getting a lot more receptions, a lot more yards, because Hopkins is just going to continue to be guarded by that number one corner and be double teamed, and it'll be really struggling for him. So that'll open things up for Will Fuller. But I was not particularly impressed with either of these teams this week. You could say that this game was just kind of a battle for that AFC South title. I mean, they were tied in the division, and, well, the Titans have inserted themselves there also, but I was expecting more from these teams. They came out a bit sluggish. I was expecting a better showing after they got blown out against the Ravens, but the Texans somewhat carried over their struggles from that Ravens game to this game. I think these teams are both playoff contenders in the AFC, but if they're looking to beat the Patriots or Ravens most likely on the road, they will need to step up big time. Hopefully the Texans can show us something big in their huge matchup this week against the Patriots. But the Colts have a big matchup with the Texans to really show us, the Titans, to really show us who's going to be competitive in that AFC South title race. So not really impressed with either of these teams, but maybe they can show us something in this week's big games. All right, now let's move on to the second game, these 1 o'clock games. The first 1 o'clock game was Dolphins 24 at Browns 41. So for the Dolphins, Ryan Fitzpatrick had some luck, but just not enough on his birthday. He turned 37, I believe, but 2 touchdowns, but also 2 interceptions. Fitzpatrick ran for 45 yards and a touchdown, which the only thing I can say about that is if you're going to Baltimore and face Lamar Jackson and you allow you allow Fitzpatrick to run for 45 yards, then what's going to happen when Lamar Jackson comes into your building or you go into Baltimore? But for me, the defense was a bigger concern for the Dolphins. Again, I'm not going to go too much in depth. They let up 41 points. Now, this Browns offense is explosive, but you just can't do that against any team. So I'm not going to talk too much about the Dolphins, but the Browns offense finally showed up for the most part. Kareem Hunt proved to be a valid offensive threat. His numbers, 37 rush yards and 9 receiving yards, for me, don't tell the whole story. As that dual threat, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, scary two-headed monster that can kill you through the air and on the ground. Because I think now that with the addition of Hunt, it just adds another weapon to that team that hopefully they can continue to use in creative ways and help this team to get back into the shape that we all thought they would be in. Baker Mayfield did miss a couple easy throws in the end zone, but aside from that, he had a great game. He had 327 yards and 3 touchdowns. So was this the spark that the Browns needed? Nick Chubb had 166 yards from scrimmage, and Odell did have 84 receiving yards and a touchdown, but Jarvis Landry stole the show. 148 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think the only negative thing I really saw was the Browns' offensive line did struggle on occasion, but we saw oftentimes that there were easy 5-yard rushes from Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb due to good offensive O-line play. So a little bit of inconsistency there. But yeah, for the most part, it was a great game. And yeah, so that's about all I have to say for that game. Now, let's move on. Lions 16 at Redskins 19. This one I'm not going to say too much on because This doesn't really have either too many playoff implications for either team, as the Lions are a team that probably will not make the playoffs, and the Redskins, same for them. But the big highlight of this game, the Redskins got their second win. The Redskins have a record of 2-9, not great, but they still beat the Lions, so that's terrible for the Lions, good for the Redskins. And it was good to see Dwayne Haskins had led his team to victory. Maybe it's a little bit of boost of confidence for him. But the Lions, come on. I'm a little concerned for them. They've just been on downward spiral on every part of their team just has been struggling. Lions defense has really not been playing well at all. They emerged as a great team at the start of the year in terms of defense, but they started 2-0-1, and now they're 3-7-1. They've lost 4 games in a row. Come on. I was really expecting bigger things from this Lions team, but they just haven't. Obviously, they've lost Matthew Stafford, Kerryon Johnson. I don't know. Is that enough of an excuse, though? So, although it was against the Redskins, the offensive line was held strong for the most part. And given time to throw, there was many instances where Jeff Driscoll just threw bad balls in which the receivers had no chance of making plays. Now, this isn't really going to affect them too much because hopefully Stafford comes back and he's good. And but Haskins, so that's one thing I want to talk about because, that will have implications for the future for this Redskins. They're going to, in terms of who they're going to want at quarterback. He did not look great, but he did lead his team to victory, so that's solid. He completed 44% of his passes, even though he had no touchdowns and 1 interception. One instance in the game, Dwayne Haskins missed a very easy throw McLaurin in the end zone, and this was repeated multiple times as the Redskins struggled to convert in the end zone. As we've seen all season, they've scored something like 6 touchdowns and in 70 something crazy like that. They just have not been able to convert in the red zone all season long. But Jeff Driscoll threw interceptions against a below-average Redskins defense. But this game doesn't really matter for this season. And it was also see that when the Redskins needed him, Dwayne Haskins delivered. And it was also good to see, how much Matthew Stafford really makes a difference for that Lions team. Okay. Let's move on to Raiders versus Jets, or Raiders at Jets, sorry. What was this game? Are you kidding me? Raiders 3, Jets 34? What was that? We all thought the Raiders were some explosive young team, but they missed third down opportunities, which were costly. They were just disorganized this week. Tyrell Williams, some other receivers dropped beautifully thrown passes from Carr. I really think Carr is a great quarterback. He's been throwing great balls to all of his receivers. But the defense just struggled to make Sam Darnold uncomfortable and often allowed him to throw to his first option, which you can't do because, it's going to happen, but this Jets team, it's not like it's not like you have too many things to be concerned about, but they maybe have just proved us wrong because of how many weapons we saw from that Jets team. They were getting balls to everyone from Le'Veon Bell, Robbie Anderson, they had a bunch of guys, Jamison Crowder. We're all getting involved in the receiving game. And Darnold completed 20 of 29 passes, threw for upward of 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. He looked great. He looked comfortable. And that's about all I have to say for the Jets. It was just a big win for them. And they're technically not eliminated from the playoffs yet. I don't think it's going to happen. But, yeah, we'll have to see. Rough day for the Raiders, though. At this point, every game matters if they're trying to beat out these other competing AFC teams, and they can't lose to a team like the Jets. Come on. They play the Chiefs next week, so if they can get a win there, that'll be big for them because it'll definitely put them back in this discussion for one of the competitors for that AFC wildcard spot. All right, let's go. Giants 14 at Bears 19. Not too much to say about the Giants. Daniel Jones threw for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns without an interception. So good performance for him. He's been relatively consistent, not great, but not bad either. So maybe the Giants have found their guy here in Daniel Jones. A lot of people were saying that they haven't, but I think they may have. Impressive performance by the run defense of the Giants, even though I think they might have the worst defense in football. They only gave up 25 yards to Tariq Cohen, and especially with a Bears team that often relies on the run because they're poor quarterback in Mitch Trubisky, but they were able to hold them to lesser yards. The Giants are most likely going to have a good pick in this upcoming draft, so I think that a receiver, an offensive lineman, or piece in the secondary be good because I think, especially if they're confident in Daniel Jones, but I have no reason, I see no reason that they shouldn't be confident in him because he's been playing pretty well. But yeah, the Bears offense has many quick weapons that pose threats, in all different ways. We saw Tariq Cohen, Anthony Miller, Taylor Gabriel. Not all of them are super spectacular, names or big names, but they're quick guys. They can get around, and we saw multiple times where they were able to get open in the field, and they were able to pick up 10, 15 yards just because of how fast they are. So that was cool to see from the Bears, but not much there. Again, not too many playoff implications. Now let's move on to Panthers at Saints. The Panthers lost this one barely, 31-34. And here I have to say that the Panthers put up a fight. They were solid. Most people thought that they would just get blown out by the Saints because we were expecting, a comeback, a second comeback week from the Saints after we're kind of been doubted on. I don't think there's any reason to be concerned for the Saints because some people are saying that they're falling off. No, they're not. They have a Hall of Fame head coach, Hall of Fame quarterback. Nothing to be concerned about there, in my opinion. But Kyle Allen was competent like always, good but not great. He had 256 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. And I don't know, that we saw the ball get spread out a little bit, but it was to the main guys. DJ Moore was very impactful. He had his second game in a row with upwards of 100 receiving yards, so that was really good to see from him. And the Panthers could really never get the ball moving on the ground, as the Saints have the 4th best run defense in the league, only allowing 88.5 yards on the ground per game, which is very, very good. McCaffrey played well, as always, but not on the ground, but through the air, where he caught 9 balls and for 69 yards. But it was interesting to see that McCaffrey only averaged 2.7 yards per carry when he got the ball on the ground. So that just speaks volumes to how good that Saints rush defense is. So the Saints mostly had positives on offense, but they had some negatives on defense, as Marshawn Lattimore was out. Big hit for the Saints because he's been shutting down number 1 receivers all year, and without him, they don't really have that X factor on defense that you like to see from a team. But I mean, they're still a good defense, obviously, as I just said, their rush defense, but their pass defense suffers a little bit. That's why I think we saw so many big plays from Greg Olsen and DJ Moore and all of them. But through the game, I think there were some sloppy, unforced errors from the Saints that if they really want to be competing for a Super Bowl, you shouldn't really be seeing out of them. But we did see some interesting seam routes ran from Jared Cook on offense, which was good to see, just spreading out those threats. Kamara was used in the wide receiver position a couple times, and Latavius Murray actually proved himself to be a great fit for the Saints organization, kind of replacing Mark Ingram as, that power back that they used to have, and, lets Kamara kind of be off on the sideline a little bit like he was used to. It's just another win for the Saints as they move past the Packers in the playoff picture. I think it was a big win for them. But Panthers are essentially eliminated. I mean, it was not a bad loss for them. I think they kind of had the game a little bit in their hands, but they let it go. So it was an interesting game. All right, now it's on to the next one, which was a little bit sloppier. Not so many points on the board. Seahawks 17 at Eagles 9. And the only thing I have to say here is, what was that, Eagles? Come on. You guys had your backs up against the wall. Dallas has the lead in the division, and we were expecting, okay, maybe this is the week that the Eagles are going to get back on track, but it was the furthest thing from that. The offense couldn't do anything whatsoever. Wentz gave up 2 interceptions and fumbled the ball 3 times. The team as a whole was just a mess on offense, and there's I don't really see one group that can be blamed. I think Wentz didn't play well. The receivers were dropping balls. Lane Johnson was out. There was just bad weather conditions. It was just a bad day for that Eagles team as a whole. And I'm kind of worried about the Eagles. They need, I think if they want to compete in that NFC, they're just really going to have to get things together if they even want to have a chance at making any noise in that playoff picture. Now, the positive for the Eagles was that their defense against Russell Wilson, who's been absolutely dynamic all season, was pretty solid. They stood up to the Seahawks sometimes in the red zone, but when the offense would make mistakes, the defense would kind of make up for it in a way. But no matter how well the defense plays, it's always just going to be it can't be overshadowed by a bad offense. Seattle, they looked good, but not spectacular. I think Russell Wilson played pretty well. He's continuing to make his case for MVP, but he did struggle a little bit. I'm not there was a little bit of wind in the air, but Russell Wilson threw some great deep balls, and I think that he played well. The team as a whole was fine. They only put up 17 points on the board, but that was partly because the Eagles' defense was playing so well. Not sure if it was Seattle's defense or the Eagles' offense, but it was an ugly game to watch nonetheless. I think it was maybe a little bit of both. But it'll be interesting to see where these two teams end up, because I think Seattle is definitely a lock for the playoffs. They're one of the best teams in the league, in my opinion. But the Eagles, they're kind of floating in that weird area. They're not going to make that wild card, but they're kind of they control their own destiny almost. They kind of need the Cowboys to lose. But if they can beat the Cowboys in that other game, then they definitely have a shot. Luckily for them, they have easier schedule heading into these next couple weeks. All right, let's get into the next game. Tampa Bay 35 at Atlanta 22. Battle of two teams to see who's the bottom feeders of the NFC South. We thought Atlanta maybe had got something going, but it appears that other than those two games where they beat the Saints and the Falcons with impressive wins, I think those were just luck and will probably be forgotten, honestly. But the Falcons' offensive line just was rough. They just were letting Matt Ryan just be pressured nonstop, and it was not good. Jameis Winston, like always, did what he does best, rack up yards and touchdowns and then throw multiple interceptions. I have a lot of praise for this Buccaneers team because I think they played a really good game. The defense, they had they're the second best rush defense in the league, which is impressive in itself. And their secondary is known to be bad, but I saw some good energy out there. I'm going to give some credit to them because I like the young energy with that secondary. They were making tackles, they were hustling, and they seemed motivated, and I like that. If they're going to get things back together in that secondary, then that's exactly what you need to see. I think it was big improvements for that defense, and hopefully that continues. And then Godwin, monster day. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin really have become a pick-your-poison, two-headed monster this season. When you guard one, you commit to shut one down, then it's the other one that shows how big, and then vice versa. It's just really fun to watch. Ronald Jones actually did have some solid runs, but not too many playoff implications here, but just were some interesting things to see from both teams. All right, now let's head into Denver, who got crushed in Buffalo. Denver 3, Buffalo 20. And games with both these teams, I think, always low scoring because neither offense is just very high powered offense, but and they have good defenses, both of them. But I will say Josh Allen has quietly been great. Over the past 6 games, he has thrown 11 touchdowns with 1 interception. That is impressive by any standards, not just a second-year quarterback. I think he's kind of getting lost in the discussion because Lamar Jackson is just playing out of his head right now, but we saw Josh Allen showing off his arm a little bit and his legs also. He ran for 56 yards on the ground. That was interesting to watch. I think he definitely has a bright future for him. And if he can stay healthy, just like Lamar Jackson and a lot of these young quarterbacks, I think that he has a chance of being a great quarterback for the rest of his career. The Bills' defense showed up again. Top 10, maybe even top 5 defense, in my opinion. They've led up the third least pass yards, only behind New England and San Fran, who everyone's talking about how historic defenses. But the Bills, they're just kind of getting lost in that. I mean, they have had an easy schedule, but you can't just discredit that stat because of their easier schedule. The Broncos, though, it was kind of the opposite story. They just did not play well. Brandon Allen was awful, and I just got news that Drew Lock is going to be starting, which will be super fun. I've heard that he was a very accurate quarterback in college, and maybe he can be the spark this Broncos team needs again. I think they're out of the playoff picture, but this will be an interesting offseason for the Broncos. See what they want to do. They've got so many pieces that are good. Cortland Sutton and all of that. They got some good defensive pieces, but we'll see where they want to add to and stuff like that. But yeah, so not a big game for Brandon Allen's Broncos, and yeah, we'll see with them. But I think Buffalo, if they really want to compete with top teams, I saw some like, they haven't really, they made some bad errors and mistakes. Before halftime, they got a shot at scoring, but they miscommunicated and wasted their last time out with 6 seconds left in the half. You just can't do that if you want to be a good team. All right, it was an interesting Bills team. I think it's an interesting Bills team, but, it's not a great one, I don't think. I think they're closer to an average team, but they could prove me wrong. I hope they do, honestly. But so next game, Pittsburgh at Cincinnati. Cincinnati's just bad, and I don't think anybody questions that. And then I'm gonna say, was this a big one for the Steelers? I mean, in a way, they won, so you can't take that away from them. But they claimed the 6th seed for the AFC playoffs, so now they're in the playoff picture. It's theirs to lose at this point. But they put in Delvin Duck Hodges. I think this provides maybe the spark that they needed. I don't think he's significantly better than Mason Rudolph, but I think it's just a breath of fresh air because everyone was getting frustrated with Mason Rudolph. He was throwing terrible balls, and it was just frustration all around. I think we saw Mike Tomlin say something about how he said people asked him why they put him in, and he said because he wasn't killing us, just kind of taking a shot at Mason Rudolph there. But yeah, interesting dynamic there in Pittsburgh with all of the stuff that's going on. They got a big game this weekend in the Browns, but the Steelers' defense was great against Cincinnati. Like always, I think they are a very good defense. I don't think they're one of the top in the league, but TJ Watt, the whole Steelers, they were getting to Ryan Finley. And yeah, I think that the offensive line is just great. We saw Benny Snell go off 98 rushing yards this week. You can put anybody behind him. Shows the power of the Steelers' offensive line. We saw it last year with Connor. This year with Benny Snell. Just anyone behind that Steelers' offensive line. I think they might have the best line in the league. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where the Steelers teams ends up in the playoff picture and whether or not they can give any of those tougher teams, Baltimore, New England, a run for their money. But what I have to say about the Bengals, not too much. It's just an ongoing struggle for them. They're putting Andy Dalton in at QB. I think they've got some talent there. I don't think everything is not so bad there, but Joe Burrow is looking awfully good in that draft. So, maybe Andy Dalton could end up on a QB-needy team that isn't so bad because I think he's a decent quarterback. And, yeah, so that's all I got to say about that game. Now let's move on to the later games. We got Jacksonville 20 at Tennessee 42. It was a big win for the Titans in this game. And I think one of the questions that we've all been thinking about is Tannehill right for the Titans? I think he actually is. I think he's kind of revamped this Titans offense. Everyone's kind of getting sick of Marcus Mariota, who I just do not think is good whatsoever. And I'm glad they finally moved on. A lot of these teams with those quarterbacks are just kind of letting them sit, hoping they improve. But no, Tennessee scrapped him, put in Ryan Tannehill, and he's been doing great for him. I think it's just a lesson that other teams can learn from in the league. The Titans, I think they're legit. They're firing on all cylinders. Adoree Jackson, the secondary, really limited shark, who was usually the Jaguars' number one receiver. But Leonard Fournette, however, he had a relatively solid outing aside from what happened mostly for the Jaguars, which was just bad. He had 97 yards on the ground and 60-plus in the air, so solid there. But the Titans, it's really cool to see how they distribute the ball to so many people. They've thrown 10 touchdowns to different receivers this season, which is one of the best in the league, which it's great to see that they're able to spread that ball out. They're not relying on one or two guys to make all the plays. But yeah, Derrick Henry, too, had one of his monster runs and finished with 159 yards. So this Titans team, I don't see anything too negative in this game for them. They had plenty of pressures on Nick Foles due to good coverage down the field. It was just great all around for them. Now, the Jaguars, not so much. I just want to say, at this point, the Jaguars are eliminated from the playoffs. Gardner Minshew should be put in at QB. So that I think they get a better sense of that talent that they have there. And yeah, I think that the Titans definitely could be competing for this AFC South and get in the playoffs. I think they could surprise some people. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say for that game. Now let's move on to Dallas, who lost to New England in New England 9-13. And I think this was the most watched game since 1996, which is crazy. There were some bad weather conditions, and maybe that was part of the reason that Dallas struggled on offense a little bit. But I think there's a little bit of frustration there in Dallas, and I think this Thanksgiving game coming up, it will be big to see what happens with Jason Garrett and all that. I think it's big to see if they can bring back some momentum, if they can beat that Bills team that's 8-3. Yeah, but that's Dallas. They kind of beat themselves. The Patriots, they're just such a disciplined team. They'll take advantage of mistakes. Like we saw one touchdown scored in the game was because of a blocked punt by the Patriots. Yeah, that was good play, but usually those blocked punts are just mistakes made from one team. But early in the game, we expected that the running games would get going, but the Patriots were getting the run game going really well also. I think, N'Keal Harry caught a touchdown, but so I was thinking to myself, maybe he can provide the receiver that the Patriots need, but I don't know. I think the Patriots are more lacking a deep threat receiver. I think N'Keal Harry's maybe just an upgraded Mohamed Sanu. Just a physical receiver, nothing too fast. But yeah, just another game where Belichick, the defense, making good tackles, not making mistakes, and they just let the other team beat themselves. And that's what happened this game. And yeah, that's all I got to say for this game. New England keeps that number one spot. Dallas keeps the NFC East because of the Eagles' loss. So yeah, all right, let's move on to what was supposed to be the game of the week. Green Bay, who got crushed in San Francisco 37-8. And all I got to say for Green Bay was just, what was that? Come on. Prime time game. It was flex there. Everyone was saying that this was going to be the game of the year. This is time to prove people that you are a legit team. And you just get smacked in the face by the 49ers. Just Aaron Rodgers looked off. The 49ers were just getting pressure all night. Sure, they had a banged-up offensive line, but you just can't allow that to happen. And then the 49ers have a big game this week at the Ravens, and that'll be interesting to watch. But again, just a really big struggle for the Packers defense, mainly through the air, though. The 49ers, they averaged 18 yards a reception. That's unacceptable for a team that is seen as Super Bowl contenders. You just can't allow that. 18 yards. Are you kidding me? But they were not so bad in the run game. They let up 111 yards on the ground, which is still pretty pathetic, but it wasn't terrible. After this, I think I can trust the 49ers, but can we really trust the Packers? Twice in 3 weeks, the Packers offense has struggled mightily against the Chargers and the 49ers. So we thought that Chargers game may have been a fluke, but maybe we're wrong. Now the Packers are in a position to give the division up to the Vikings, who have the same record, and now the Packers are out of the teams that would have a bye because the Saints passed them in that playoff picture. So yeah, that was just a struggle for the Packers. Bad game. All right, let's move on to Baltimore Rams, Monday Night Football. Just another dominant performance from the Ravens and just another disappointing from the Rams. It's just two teams headed in different directions. One going up, one going down. I thought that maybe the Ravens would slow down a little bit and the Rams would catch them because they had their backs up against the wall. But now they're just eliminated from the playoffs. It was bad. The Ravens' offensive line was just great. Lamar Jackson, 5 touchdown passes, put himself probably in position to win the MVP. Marcus Peters got another interception, same with Jimmy Smith. But the Rams, what are they? They're just flat. They don't have any heart. I don't see anything, no spark in them. But they're in that division with the 10-1 49ers, 9-2 Seahawks. I think they're done. But yeah, so it's just bad game for the Rams, great game for the Ravens. Just the stories of these two teams. Rams just going off the rails and Baltimore heading straight for the top. All right, thank you guys so much for listening, and I'm excited for these Thanksgiving games, these games coming up this week. Yep, until next time, bye.